welcome to the support show for artists and creatives, where I'm going to be taking some of the real struggles that this community are facing on their creative journeys and trying to offer some response, as well as just open up a bit of a discussion around how we can try and move through these problems that we might be facing.
What are you doing?
I'm just looking at the world.
I put this request for people to come forward with the issues that they were struggling with on their creative journey a couple of weeks back. And one of the first responses that I got came through from an audience member called Ash. Ash described being in the process of going through a career change. And I picked this question not only because I thought it was a powerful story, but also because it had some universal themes that I thought might kind of resonate with a lot of the creatives in this community. Themes around insecurity maybe in their work, in their confidence that they have for their work, and also around finding new direction and trying to build positive momentum in their creative journey. So here was some of that message Ash sent me around that specific story. I struggle with debilitating insecurity, Ash wrote in. I had a successful corporate career, but I was incredibly unhappy. And I quit that job to pursue a creative path as a digital illustrator. Ash then goes on to describe how it would be necessary to pick up some new skills to push forward in that new direction, but how the progress of picking up those skills was being hindered by a growing insecurity. My insecurity was heightened by my family's lack of support, Ash writes. Creativity was a children's hobby according to my family. By quitting my job to pursue a creative path, I was essentially regressing in maturity. I'm already insecure, and having people I love question my decision made things worse. This insecurity is rotting away at my progress. The inspiration won't come because the only thought in my head is, did I make a mistake? I know I didn't, because remaining in my corporate career was definitely the wrong choice. But if I try to pursue the creative path and it doesn't work out, then what? Maybe I'm not meant to succeed at this. It hit me that Ash said that it was clear that the right decision had been to quit that previous corporate career. And I thought that was a really strong point to stand on here, that even with the maybe growing self-doubt and the insecurity, there was still certainty that the decision that had been made was the right one. The overarching point that I thought we could talk about here was how Ash discusses the ideas around respect for the decisions that have been made and the direction that's being taken. And I thought hopefully I could offer here just some really practical steps that we might use to build up our own momentum and just have a better chance to use our own self-respect and self-drive to push forward in that new direction. You obviously left your previous career with a growing negativity about where that direction was taking you. But I wondered if now that you'd been able to step away from that you might be able to reframe that negative experience a bit and ask what skills and growth that you can take from that previous experience that's going to serve you going forward. I guess it can sound like a bit of a cliche, but I think there is a lot of truth in the idea that often it's the negative experiences that we've had in the past, or the places where we might have taken a wrong turn, that actually come to form our kind of superpowers in the long run. When I was thinking about your story, I reflected back a bit on my own experience and how I got into video editing work originally. I think there'll be a lot of people who are watching this who will have their own experience of making this career change and might also know of some useful resources or just be able to share a bit of their own experience that might help. In terms of me, in my teens and my early 20s, I had quite a lot of customer service roles and some teaching experience too. And so when I did end up making that direction change into using one of my passions, which was video editing, and trying to make money from that, I ended up sitting alongside people who were younger than me and who had graduated from more formal pathways into video production and video editing. And a lot of them had a better grasp of the software or some of the skills that we were using to do those jobs. I had to do some of my own self-led training online to start to close up those skill gaps to the people around me. But over time, I actually found that being a little bit older and also my background in customer service roles and some teaching experience actually went to serve me really well. Professional work in those creative industries is going to require some artistic and creative engine. However, a lot of the value that you're going to bring is your ability to understand client needs, report on the work that you're doing with colleagues, and maybe sell some projects in terms of freelancing. Being a little bit older in life and having some past experience that we can pull on is always going to help us in terms of matching that skill set or having a different kind of skill set to people who have come into this creative industry from a more linear pathway. As a second point, I wanted to come back to the idea of building our own momentum and just put my hand up and say that I don't think driving ourselves forward is ever really that simple, and it's something that a lot of people struggle with.
Is that weird? Do you think I'm weird?
Kind of.
With a lot of the more divisive motivational content that might be online, we can see how it's quite easy to start feeling bad about ourselves or thinking that we're weaker than some others if we can't just purely self-motivate and drive ourselves towards our goals. But there's a reason why companies use simple things like setting goals and tracking our progress, doing reviews, to try and put some useful structures around motivating ourselves to actually hit deadlines and get the things done that we want to get done. And when we find ourselves in a place where we're going to be driving our own work and our own progress forward, it's really useful to look at some of those simple practical tools that we can use to help us do that. Setting your own manageable goals, documenting and tracking your progress, splitting up different tasks onto a calendar, and then setting up some alerts for when you need to get them done. I didn't want to throw too much stuff out here and was hoping to leave some space for others to come in the comments and talk about how they might self-motivate. But to close this first response, I did want to bring in a few simple questions or simple prompts that might help people explore the topics that we're discussing here in their own creative journeys. As a quick note before we jump in here, I've put all the prompts from this video as well as a lot of extra resources in that free newsletter, so you can jump across and copy and paste to steal from that into your own document if you want to try turning this into something to journal on yourselves or a little bit more of a workbook. So jumping into the prompts, and the first one, what kind of tasks would you want to be completing every week to get the momentum moving forward? Can you separate these tasks into different buckets? For example, software training, deeper creative work, applications for jobs, and spaces where you might be able to gather some free work to build a portfolio. What time in the day is best to push forward with these different categories of work? i.e., when do you best do your creative work? And when is your energy going to be more conducive to perhaps online training, making applications, sending emails, or looking for opportunities for work? Are there any additional things you can do to ring fence these focus sessions and increase your chance of having success at these tasks? This could be as simple as going to the library to do them, or working in a space or at a time when you know you're not going to be disturbed. And finally, are there any practices that we can take from a more shared or corporate scenario, such as weekly reviews or structured planning and tracking documents, which we might be able to feed into our own methods and help us on our path going forward? Okay, I'm going to shut up now, but I hope some of that was somewhat useful. And even if the things that I've said don't resonate exactly with your experience, I hope that this kind of discussion might help some people kind of come up with their own ideas about how they might reframe their work or think about their direction in a bit of a different way. Let's jump on to the second message here from the audience, which came through on the YouTube post that I did from someone called Anna. Anna makes content for a living where she paints, and builds tutorials. And she wrote in to say, I've been struggling with the balance between what I want to explore and what the algorithm favors. I often feel like I have less creative freedom now that there's pressure to keep up the views and stay within the niche that I've become known for. Not complaining, just stating the obvious tension between optimizing the external presentation of my art, i.e. the business side, and what is actually needed to grow as an artist, i.e. time, effort, experimentation and risk. I wanted to talk about this question from Anna because I think a lot of creatives and artists are thinking about making content around their work these days and trying to monetize that activity. And although in my videos I do discuss a lot of the negative things that can come from that, it's really not something that we can blame anyone for when all we're trying to set out to do here is spend as much time as possible engaging with those activities that we love. The interesting thing about this, that's true for me at least, and I think that I can hear reflected in Anna's message, is that I actually think that I had more time to spend on my completely free kind of passion projects, creative passion projects, before I started trying to monetize them directly and use those creative skills to build out this channel and try and get a paycheck from it. So yeah, I'm kind of right in this boat alongside Anna's message here, and I'm hoping that maybe there's some other creatives who might be watching this who can also add to the discussion again in those comments. I thought something useful that I could offer here, which I'm actually going to undertake myself, would just be to pull in some of those questions and prompts again to try and bring forward a little bit of a review of exactly where we're at and externalize some of the thoughts or issues that we feel like we're facing. The goal of this task is just gonna simply be to think as honestly and clearly as possible about what we're actually spending our time doing here and how closely that relates to that original creative drive or that thing that we fell in love with. How much time do you actually spend doing the artistic work that you used to do before you started trying to use these skills to make money? What are your long-term goals in terms of monetizing these skills? And is feeding the algorithm to try and scale your business in a maximum way actually going to feed where you want to be in 10 years' time? Or is there a smaller scale and more bespoke kind of structure for this and future that might be just as valuable a route to go down? Are there things that you engage in around the business side of your creative goals that could be dropped and switch for something that more truly reflects your original creative passion? I wanted to jump in and drop a quick note on that one to say that I think that it's really easy once those lines become faded between our business success or social media success and our art, for certain things that we might spend our time on to masquerade as something in line with that original creative passion, when actually they're going to be detracting from any real sense of quality or value. For me, this can be as simple as recognizing that a podcast you might be listening to around business development every week can actually be dropped off and switched out for maybe engaging in something that directly looks at the creative work that you love. And then the final prompt is just going to be, again, something a little bit about some boundaries we might put in here. Are there some simple ways you could help to create a boundary between your professional use of creative skills and the time that you spend actually engaging in those artistic practices that you see as the heart of your passion? This can be as simple as having a specific chair that you only use for painting and never for video editing, or just putting in those calendared times when you're only going to work on your artistic practice and you're not going to think about the business side. When I was working with that final prompt myself, I came up with an interesting idea for a framework that I think could help me. My understanding of that creative process and creative problem solving is a lot of it actually takes place in the background, kind of behind the scenes, when maybe we're sleeping or walking to work. If I'm going to be waking up in the middle of the night and something's going to come into my mind, I don't want it to be around how I can maximize views or get a new piece of content onto social media. I want it to be something that actually feeds the heart of that creative practice that I'm really passionate about. So to try and signal to my mind that this is what I want it to be working on behind the scenes, I thought it could be an interesting practice to try and always finish the day by engaging in even a very small task from that creative drive at the heart of your practice, and to start the next day again with even a very small amount of that creative practice. This could be as simple as finishing the workday by moving to another seat and doing 10 minutes of drawing or playing your instrument. And then the next day, before you start your emails or crack into some video editing, actually, again, doing another 10 minutes of that activity. I'm going to be linking a podcast in the newsletter too, which looks at the artists who make Song Exploder, one of my favourite podcasts around songwriting and the creative process. This artist started off as a musician, and after the success of the podcast, which is about his passion, music, he found himself having to create conscious ways to bring his own practice back into the mix. And he talks about the tension he felt when he started losing his direct practice as an artist and a musician, and also some of the ways he managed to build out some boundaries that allowed him to bring that direct practice back in. Okay, I'm almost done here now. But again, I wanted to just state that I think I do need your help here in order to make this idea around this being a workshop actually come to fruition. If it's only my experiences and my voice and perspective talking about these topics and struggles, then this conversation is going to be really limited. I had a larger than expected response when I put out that original call out for people to get in touch with their own stories of the things that they'd been struggling with on their creative journey. So over the next few videos in this new format, I'm going to be dealing with those responses that came through. However, saying that, in the future, if I can make this kind of video work, I will be putting out more opportunities to send in your own struggles from your creative journeys. And if you do not want to miss that, then consider signing up to that newsletter below, which I think is probably one of the best ways that you can make sure you don't miss that messaging. Alright, with all that said, peace to everyone watching, and yeah, speak soon.